You're all done already. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to welcome Quinton Little Brave. He's originally from Lakota Sioux tribe. He's sub-chief with the Rosebud Sioux tribe and Black Pipe community. And he currently lives in Sandpoint with his wife Stephanie and lots of other favorite loved ones.
Yes.
So I'm going to let you take it away. And he is our last speaker until September.
Oh, cool. Can you all hear me? Or do I need to use this thing? Yeah? Can you hear me? Yeah? No? Yeah? Cool. Like Jennifer said, my name is Quinton Little Brave. I am a sub-chief with the Rosebud Sioux tribe, which is in South Dakota. Originally come from South Dakota. Not exactly sure how I was going to give the talk or what I was going to talk about, but like I told Jennifer, I'm just going to start when I was a little tiny guy. Growing up that way with my grandparents, first of all, my grandparents believed in the old system of living like that. So I was born in a log cabin with no electricity, no running water, in the middle of a snowstorm. Fast forward a couple years later, my grandmother says, okay, you have to learn this way of life before we can put you out there in the world. So I didn't start school until I was almost 10 years old. That's when the Catholic school, the missionary came in and said, you have to go to school. It's by law now. So they took me out of the home and cut my braids off and put us in school. All the way up until 1992, we weren't allowed to talk our own language. We weren't allowed to practice our way of life. So on the weekends, we'd run home and practice all these things and talk to my grandma in our language and stuff like that. And so I tell my kids, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so I can understand my language, but I can't speak it fluently like I used to when I was a little bitty guy. Fast forward a little bit, in 92, I got awarded a football scholarship down to Colorado, so I got to meet the Broncos. That's why I'm a Bronco fan. But not only through that, I was able to see what the outside world provided for everybody. I got invited to go do a cultural exchange program in Boston, Massachusetts, where they thought we still lived in teepees. So I got to explain some of those things. And a lot of those questions were, how do you guys live? What do you guys do? What's your normal day kind of thing? And so we talked about those things inside there. And then I was like, well, maybe we need to talk more about this out here because nobody knows we actually exist. So I came back. We did a protest sitting outside of our school so we could learn our language, our culture, our spirituality. Basically, long story short, I was a bully. So I bullied a lot of people to sit down with me. And then all my friends from the football team, we sat there and we held the whole school. And this was a private school and they had like about 400 plus students in there. So we sat out there for a whole week and calls Governor George Mickelson to come down and the other TV places to come down. He says, what do you guys want? All we want to do is be able to practice our language because it's dying. I'm not saying that I helped found the thing, but now in the state of South Dakota, the first 4 hours of the school day is for Lakota language, Lakota song and dance, and Lakota spirituality. And that's kind of a cool thing. Yep. With that, when I graduated high school, because I was raised by my grandparents, I was always talking to different people here and there. The Sinte Gleshka, which means Spotted Tail University in Rosebud, offered me an honorary doctor position to be able to teach the younger generation and other people our language, our song and dance, and our spirituality. But I wanted to see the world, so I said, no, I'm going to go out here. So I ran out here. And when I came out this can you hear me on this thing? Okay, cool. I forgot I had it on. So I came out this way, and I needed a job. And so one of the jobs that I first came out here was out there in Seattle area. I was a caregiver, or NAC or CNA, whatever they went by. I was a caregiver. And so I would work at night, the knock shift or whatever. And so I saw a lot of this processing stuff going on that I normally saw going up with my grandparents, because my grandparents used to take us as little kids and say, a person doesn't grieve alone. We grieve as a family. We grieve as a community. And so we sometimes we would take hands and sit there and hold the loved one's hands and talk to them. And in our way of life, our prayers are songs. So we'd sing a lot. I was telling Jennifer, it's kind of weird how it all happened, but it all happened the way it is supposed to happen, because, like I said, I just flew here because yesterday I just buried my uncle in North Carolina. And then so I flew back here. So this whole thing is like really fresh. So there in the native way of life, we have ceremonies that go along with the whole thing. With my uncle, I'll tell you the whole process, how it all happened. So anyway, he got sick and this and that. We'll fast forward through that. And then we were called to come down. We came down and we sat with him. We talked to him. We prayed with him. We sang with him. I sang, which I was supposed to just sing one song, but I was staring out the window. I realized I sang from 12:30 at night till 5:20 in the morning, because I was more or less chanting, praying with my uncle so he would feel good. He would feel awesome in my eyes. That's how I looked at it. And I realized that I was getting thirsty, and I looked at the time and it was 5:20. I was like, okay. But not only that, when those things are in that process of crossing over to the other side, we call it, we eat a lot. There's a lot of food all the time. Somebody's always cooking. Because growing up, my grandparents used to always say, you have to feed the spirit. The soul has to be fed. And we feel it by food and songs and prayers. And so, although the hospice nurse came in and the doctors came in, oh, you got to close the windows, and I was telling them, no, we can't close the windows because the elements are outside. If you want the windows closed, we would take him outside and put him in a teepee. Because my grandmother used to always say, you come from the earth, so one day you're going to return to the earth. Sorry, I choked on my candy. Learn to live with the nature. Learn to listen to the elements. Learn to feel the heartbeat of our Mother Earth. Growing up, my grandparents used to say, you want the first blessing in the morning, wake up before the sun comes up and walk out there barefooted. Feel the energy that's coming from the earth. So I continue to do that all the time, but I go back to bed. I'm like, okay, my feet's cold. So we went through that whole process, and then whenever one of our loved ones or whoever we're dealing with passes on, there's ceremonies that go along with those things too. He passed, I think it was like 7:10 in the morning or something, By the time we called the coroner, everything else, it was already 6:30 at night, because we had to go through the ceremonial washing the body, um, fixing things up, painting him in a special way, cleansing the spirit, making sure the room is cleansed out, and everybody had their chance to do what they wanted to do and say what they wanted to say and go through the grieving process. And then the coroner was called, and then they came and did whatever they did. And then there's another ceremony to that too. And so they moved him from there in his ceremonial regalia, I call it, onto the stretcher, and then they hauled him out. And then we sang for him all the way from the bedroom all the way to and all the way out to the wherever they parked through the neighborhood, and put him in there. And then we followed him and got to the funeral home, and we sang for him, and they put him in the freezer. And then when they were done, we went and we sang that they put him in the airport, and then we flew from Sarasota, Florida to Asheville, North Carolina. So basically the casket was underneath and we were on top of the airplane. At the airport, we got out and sang for him. It's like the military thing, but it's like Native people, because he was a chief. He was the main chief in our tribe. So being a sub chief, there was 32 different chiefs with all our bonnets on. And so we did this whole procession to the funeral home there. And then they did whatever they did. And then we set the teepee up, and then we sat for 4 days and 4 nights praying, singing, rejoicing, however you want to look at it. But we sang songs and ate a whole lot. And then we covered the whole teepee. It was about the width of this room, because it was a 36-foot teepee. Covered the whole teepee with rose petals. And then we covered it with cedar, which I had brought from here because they didn't have flat cedar down there. So we took it down there. We covered that up. And then we covered it again with sage from South Dakota, even though they're only growing about this tall right now. So we had another relative go and pick all of that by the trash bags, and we covered that because we look at that as like this carpet here, but it's a spiritual carpet. And so we came and we brought him, and we put the casket there, and we kind of inched the casket all the way around the teepee to the very end. And then we sang songs the 4 days. We sat with the body. So the body's inside the teepee, and we sit there with it open, and we talk to him and rejoice, this and that. And then we close it. Question?
What is the significance of the 4 days?
The 4 days, I was kind of going to get back to that part too. But, but since you asked me, I'll get back to it before I forget again. So with those 4 days that went on, one of my nephews who's growing up there in Bellingham doesn't really understand this way of life, the Native way of life, because like I was telling them, us older generations, we're not sharing it because, like my grandmother said, once you leave here, then that's a whole different world. That world's not going to understand what you're doing here. That world is going to look at you and say that you're doing something out of the way, when realistically we've been doing this for generations. And so those 4 days, when we sit with the body, we believe that we all come into this medicine wheel of life in a direction, whether we come from the south, the north, east, or the west. We all come into this world born from a direction, whether it be, like my grandmother would say, you come in here as a wise person, you come in here as a very brave person. And so there's bravery, fortitude, wisdom, all these things. We come into this world in some direction. But we also sit there for 4 days, because when we leave this world, we leave out of the south. and then we travel on the Milky Way. And so those nights that we're sitting there, we're actually looking up to the sky, which I don't know if you guys saw, but the northern lights were like really awesome. On the Tuesday night, was it Wednesday? Oh, Friday night, the northern lights were really awesome. So we got to witness that too while that was going on. So the 4 nights we sit there because in our way of life, the medicine wheel has 4 directions. So we represent each direction for each night. But not only that, we also believe in the 7 too. The 7 is very sacred to the people because of John Elway. I just wanted to make you laugh. It was getting a little serious, so I just wanted to make you laugh. But anyway, the 7 is sacred to the Native people because we believe, if you look back into the Bible, they say the Bible was created in the 7th day, he rested or something like that. 7 is sacred to us because we look at, as the whole earth, as Mother Earth, there's 7 continents on this earth. In our tribe, there's 7 bands within our tribe. There's 7 tribes within the nation. So everything has to do with the 7 and 4. But 4 is very sacred because of the 4 directions, the 4 elements of the earth, and the 4 stages of life that we go through in this world. Any other questions? Or keep going?
What are the 4 stages of life?
I'll say that again.
What are the 4 stages of life?
So we were taught as we come into this world, we come in as a newborn. And then so we're born, somebody has to take care of us because that's how we are. We're dependent on somebody else. And then we come into being in the teenage years or whatnot, where we know everything. And so they say that's when all the knowledge is, either you caught it or you didn't, because we know everything as teenagers. And then we come into our adult lives where we came over the hump, over the hill. And that's our 3rd stage of our life. And then when we come into the 4th stage, we become dependent on somebody else to take care of us as we go back into the circle of life. Make sense? I can go on, but I probably need like 3-4 days to tell you everything. So I'm trying to cram it all together. And so with that, having to take care of my grandfather when I was 17, because he said, okay, today I'm going home. This is what he said when he woke up. So he spent the whole day making sure everything was how he wanted it in his house. And then that evening he says, okay, saddle my horse because I'm going home. So I went out, we saddled the horse. And then he was 87 years old, got on a horse, said, see you to everybody, and then rode up into the mountains. And we waited about 3 or 4 hours, and my grandma was down here singing on the back porch, looking up that direction. And then we went up that direction, and my grandpa was sitting on against a rock, and he had expired. So we put him back on the horse and walked him back down the hill and did the whole ceremonies and this and that. And so we also believe that in order to get, because we call it the happy hunting ground, to get to that side across the Milky Way, your spirit needs a spirit animal to take it for its ride. So the night we buried my grandfather, we had a tornado happen. Lightning came down, and we watched the horse run back and forth from the barn to the field, back and forth to the barn, and then the lightning struck it. And said, okay, well, then there goes our grandpa. And then the tornado was done, the lightning storm was done. a lot of those things kind of happen. And when I first took my kids down when my mother had passed, I was explaining these things to them because they grew up in Spokane. They're part Greek, and so they believed in the Orthodox way of life over there. Didn't have any knowledge because I never shared it with them. And I said, okay, my mom's gone, your grandma's gone. I'm going to show you this way of life. And it blew their mind to see how the elements kind of come together when things like this happen through prayers and songs. Even though in our everyday walk of life, you might feel like something goes by you in the daytime when you don't think about it. Oh, it must have just been the air conditioning or something. But it's actually, we believe it's actually a spirit that goes through and exiting. I don't know if that makes sense. Or you might walk into a room when something's happening like that with my son. He was like, I think I just felt grandma leave, because he walked into the room and the hair on the back of his neck stood up, he said, and it just got cold for a split second. And then he said, I don't understand it. But to this day, he still doesn't understand it. And he's like, I don't know how to explain it. And I'm like, you don't have to, because I understand. Any other questions?
I probably do. Keep going.
Am I boring you all? Okay. Yes. How did my grandfather know he was going to pass? That kind of rewinds all the way back to being how my grandparents raised us, being one with the nature, being one with the spirit, being able to feel that connection from Mother Earth, Father Sky, and the four directions, and being kind of centered with yourself. Like, for example, I knew I was going to get hurt. I just didn't know when I was going to get hurt or how bad I was going to get hurt, because I was sitting inside of one of our sweat lodges, and all of a sudden I had this feeling like I was going to get hurt. But I was like, well, I climb on roofs. I fell off the roofs before. I'll just bounce back up. Well, I walked out of my house and broke my wrist. And so through those little life challenges, and while I was growing up at the Catholic school, and once I got out of the Catholic school, then I was like, well, there's more to what life has to offer me. So I went out and explored. I would say I lived in all 50 states in America, just so I could say that I lived there. That was kind of one of my goals, because I grew up on a reservation. And in order to live there, I say I had to live there at least 3 or 4 months. So I had to have a job to pay for the rent, do all this now. But through all those times, I was baptized Christian, First Christian, Baptist, Southern Baptist, Episcopal, Lutheran, Presbyterian. I was a Jehovah's Witness. I was a Buddhist. I was also Mormon. I was Body of Christ, First Body of Christ. I've got baptized in all of these because the world I grew up in was like this. And once I came off the reservation, it was like this. And I said, well, what else is out there? And the Catholic Church talked about the heavens and God and Jesus and all this and that. And in the native ways, we talked about the Creator and the Spirit and the elements. We all pray to the same person. We just have different names. We just have different ways of praying. A lot of our native ways of praying are very similar to what the Bible is. In our native ways, we talk about what they used to talk about. I don't talk about it too much. They talk about the mass flood that came through. And then you find a similarity in the Bible too with Noah. And somewhere's in there, Jonah swallowed the whale or something. But they talk about all of those things. And in a native way, when the flood came down, that's where they say our sacred pipe, in our language is Chinoopa, comes from. And over there in Pipestone, Minnesota, we travel over there and get the pipe and we carve it because it's blood red. And we pray with those things. So I kind of got curious about all these things and all this. So I come back to South Dakota all the time in the summertime and get wood ready for my grandmother. My grandmother lived to be 106 years old. And she said, in order to live that long, don't ever eat nothing out of the can.
She's right.
Yeah.
Or box.
Yeah. So growing up, my grandparents there was 18 people in a 2-bedroom house. So we slept on the floors and everything. They jacked the house up, built the basement. We lived in the basement. But I just thought that was normal. That's how we lived. So I come back split wood because my grandmother liked the wood all the time in her wood stove. So she's like, oh, well, what's your adventure bring you to now? I said, well, I was baptized in this church. And I was baptized in this church. She's like, oh, you're making sure you get to the other side. I was like, well, one way or another, I'm going to. And so that was all on my mother's side. We grew up through going to sweat lodges and going to sun dances. And the sun dance for us, we danced 4 days of no food and no water. And that represents like when Jesus went out there in the desert and walked for 40 days with no food and no water. That's what we go through. We say that we sacrifice part of our body in order to receive prayers that come back. So they say, well, you're going to meet the Creator halfway. Well, that's how we represent it. We was like, okay, we will suffer for 4 days, no food, no water, in order to get what we pray for. And on my father's side, I just 2 years ago, I just stepped down as the president of the Native American Church of Washington. And so I was the president there. So Native American Church was basically founded back, well, our church was founded back in South Dakota, Native American Church Holy Medicine. And in order to practice our way of life through the sweat lodge, the sun dances, and going to powwows and this and that, we had to fall under the American Indian Freedom Religion Act of 73, I think it was. And then 78, we were allowed to practice our religion from 6 in the morning till 12 at noon. And then so we incorporated the Bible into our way of life. And so we called it the crossfire way of praying. So we're crossing the Bible with our native ways in order to be able to pray those ways. And so to this day, we still incorporate those things into this way of praying. People say, can anybody come? I said, well, you can stay up all night. Come on over.
Can we do it from like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.?
I like those things. And when I became president, that's one of the things I said too. I was like, well, I don't like staying up all night. Why don't we just do it from like in the morning until the evening, and then let's bring cookies in. But I got overruled. So
You got overruled.
yeah.
But it's your fireplace.
Yes. Some of those things, why things are done at night, is more or less because we believe the spirit is traveling more at night, and it's not so much distractions in the daytime. So in the daytime, there's a lot more chaos happening, and so the spirit has to maneuver around things. So at nighttime, the spirit has a clear path to do what it needs to do. And so,
I have a question.
yes.
So at the end of life, we provide comfort measures with some medications. And I'm curious how that's viewed, because I know that you have kind of more natural medicine that you might incorporate maybe towards the end of life. So I didn't know if you could talk about that. Is it accepted for like if someone's on hospice to receive morphine or any kind of drug that helps them be comfortable? Or is it, do you use more natural medicine?
That's kind of an individual question and answer to how they want to go. Like my uncle was over here, and I was telling Jennifer, he was walking on the beach in Sarasota, Florida, this and that one day, and then that evening went in because he couldn't breathe, and then 2 days later he was gone. But he was having a lot of pain. He was vomiting blood, and the stool was coming out as blood, and he was cramping up, and so we said, "Do you want medication?" And he was, I don't know, he was like in his 80s or something, and he just said, "I came into this world with nothing. That's how I want to leave." So no matter how much pain he was in, he kind of refused it, even though I was like, "Give him the morphine. If that's not going to work, then let me test it out and make sure it works." But I believe that it's an individual's kind of decision on what they want to do. When my brother was passing away, because he was in the military, he was having a hard time too. He just like, "Go ahead, put all the morphine in me you want, because I don't want to feel a thing." But they also say that when you put morphine in the body, you're numbing the body, and so the spirit doesn't know which direction to go. I don't know if any of you have ever actually sat with somebody when that process actually happens. If you try not to blink, you'll see there's a little light that comes out and then it disappears. I first noticed that when I was about 8 years old, and then when I became a caregiver out there in Washington, I was explaining this to some of my coworkers, and so we had a person that was crossing over, and so we brought all the workers in, whether it was a day off or not. We brought them all in, and we sat in the room with them. And so we were doing our different denominational things, talking, praying, singing, and this and that. And the lady, because we asked the family if we could do this, and so I could show the coworkers, and the family was like, "Yeah, let's do it." They sat with us, and we watched the little blue light come out and then disappeared. It only comes up out of the body about this far, and then it disappears.
Where does it come from? The whole body or?
No, it comes out of the mouth. But if you blink, you're going to miss it because it goes really quick. Not only that, if you're hunters, and if you go I showed this to my son too. When you go shoot the deer, before the deer dies, there's a little light that comes out the forehead, and it goes away. But I always look at it and I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't tell anybody, because maybe it's not really there. Maybe it's a fragment in my imagination. But as I showed my son and I showed these people there, and I was like, well, it's not my imagination, because it's really actually there. For some times there was a video of somebody actually catching that on video. It was on YouTube for a while. Now I can't find it, because I was going to bring it and I was going to say, here's proof, but I can't find it now. Somebody took it down.
I have a video of what I believe is my dad on my phone 2 days after he passed out in the front yard.
Yes.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we believe those things happen. Not only that, they say your loved one stays around you for 4 days. After the fourth day, it takes 3 days to travel on that side. And so we believe after the 4 days, we say, don't cry for them, don't call their names, don't try to get their attention, because they have to travel to that side. And once they get to that side, then they have the ability to come back and forth. But if we hold them here, we call them, then they feel obligated to take care of us, even though they can't take care of us. And then there's a spiritual door that gets closed. And so they get stuck here. And so then they wander around. And then some people, they call mediums in and they're like, oh yeah, this person is. And some of it's kind of true and some of it's not. But there are different ceremonies of opening those doors and sending them back over there. But that's one of the things that we talked about is, after your 4 days, then don't shed a tear for them. Don't call their name. Don't hang on to them. So let them go over there. So that's kind of the 4 and 7.
Is that only for the 3 days for them to travel over if you don't say their name, or is it continued after that?
No, it's just for the 3 days so they can get over there, do what they have to do. When my younger brother passed away in my home, that morning, I watched my mother walk in the front door and go down the stairs, and I watched my brother and my mom walk out the front door again. It was a sad situation, but I was like, well, my mom came after him on her birthday. It was his birthday, and then the next day was her birthday. And so.
So you mentioned, at the beginning about the rituals of the body and washing. Could you go into a little bit more detail about?
Yeah, I could do that. Did you have a question, Victor?
I did. I just you had mentioned, leaving windows open, which I had heard before. I'm the nurse for Benoit County, and so I am on the reservation frequently down there. And so are there and also with what Jennifer's asking too, I just wondered with cleaning of the body and leaving windows open, are there other things that we can do just in general to support Native Americans when they're going through this? I know you said like medication was individual, but are there things that we usually go in and clean the body, and that's probably not what we should be doing, right?
Well, that's kind of a really big, vague question kind of thing. And it has a lot of answers because there is 523 different tribes on this continent, US or whatever, however it is. And so each nation, each tribe, each reservation has their way of dealing with things. I mean, like California people down there, they bury their people standing up. Some people, they don't believe in cremation because they say when the last days come or whatever, however they want to look at when the body comes up again, there's no body for it to come up out of the ground. It's just ashes. Ceremonial wise, washing the bodies, stuff like this, you can basically ask, how do you want to go about this? Ask the family members. Would you like us to, or would you like to do it? A lot of times, about 90% of the time, the family members won't say nothing. They'll just sit there, especially Native people. They'll just say something. They'll just won't say nothing to you. And then after you do whatever you do, and they're like, well, they didn't ask us. Well, then why didn't you speak up? I all say. Knowing from when I came off of the reservation into out there in Seattle, that was one of the things that I came across. So it's like, I kind of like, well, if I know this, then they should know it too. But it's not that way. They don't teach it in the textbook or in the school or anything. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we can do is ask more, you know, and yeah, I mean, I haven't run into issues that I'm aware of down there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just being sensitive to everybody might be different.
There's also part of the Crow tribe. I know other tribes do it too, but the Crow tribe, it's not just a little cup of water. They put a big pan of water. The Lakota people, it's not a big pan of water, but they put a cup of water on the side of the bedstand, all this and that, because we believe that we came into this world in water, and when we leave, there's going to be water too. And so we're kind of backstroke or flip around in water for 9 months and slip and slide out through water. And so when we leave this world, they say there's water somewhere.
We had a family that had water underneath the bed, and somebody didn't know, or the staff, and they just took it and without asking questions. I was always curious about that.
Yeah.
As to why. But I think we're learning more to ask questions and not just assume that
Yeah.
a spare glass of water was under the bed for no reason.
Yes. Like I said, when I became a caregiver, I just like automatically assumed people knew these things. And so when I walk in, that was kind of one of the things. I look under the beds, I look in the drawers, and they're like, well, what are you looking for? And I'm like, I just like have to know what's going around, what's happening. I mean, some people don't want the cross around them, or they don't want certain pictures because they believe that if they're like this TV here, if the spirit comes, then the spirit's going to run into the TV rather than going out. And so that's where the windows are open and the doors are open. So there's always something for them to go out, nothing to hold them in. This is kind of rare because Chris always has questions. Yes. I mean, Chris and Jennifer has been to a couple of our ceremonies. Hi.
So I'm going back to sort of the last breath type thing. So
Uh-huh.
what happened with my mother was, and my friend reminded me, it's like sometimes they don't want to take the last breath with their family member right there. So, you know, walked with her through all of this time, but, you know, it's like I could sense and I could tell she wants to go.
Yes.
She wants, my friend had to remind me, she wants me to leave the room
Yes.
so that she feels more free to go. So do you have that kind of concept? And I mean, I don't know if that's more of a Catholic, I mean, I'm not Catholic, but more of a white person sort of thing.
You know, if you go into a room and you turn the light off with the multiple people in there, what color are they? We're all the same color. We just have different skin tones, but we're all the same people. We all have blue blood until it hit oxygen, then it turns red. That's how I look at life all the time. We're all the same. So kind of answer your question and kind of not answer your question, that has a big part of what the patient is going through. If there's a lot of sadness and grief, they could feel those things because of the energy, the feeling is really there. So as a parent, they're wanting to take care of you all the way up until they can never take care of you again. And so like when my father passed, he was there and he was trying to get up and trying to get coffee, trying to make something. And I said, hey, old man, just lay down. We're going to be okay. You took care of us this far. But I don't even live in your house anymore, so I must be okay. And within an hour, he was gone. So it was just reassuring them that they're okay, even though you're sitting there crying your eyes out, or however you want to look at it. Like when my uncle was down there, I told the family right there, I says, we're not going to hold him here. I don't want nobody to go in there and make him feel that he has to stay here. And so we all went in and we sang and had fun, laughed and everything. And then his wife was like, all right, we're going to give you this amount of time. Say what you have to say, but don't hold him here. And so she did. Then we came back in, and then next thing you know, he was gone. So it's just making them feel like they've done their job. I always say, whenever you get up in the morning and you go through your rituals of everything, we as human beings living in Western society are afraid of the truth. We're afraid to face the truth because in all reality, we want everything to be prolonged. And so we have all this faith in the world or whatnot, but when it comes down to what really needs to happen here, we don't have no faith because we're afraid of what the truth looks like. But yet a doctor could come in and just scribble all over the piece of paper and you give it to the pharmacist. The pharmacist has to believe, or you have to believe the pharmacist that he knows how to read this scribbled and give you the right medication. So you give all your faith to this person here, but yet you don't give the faith to your loved one, your patient, to know that they're okay. That's why I say we're afraid of the truth, so we want to have the doctor come in and pump him full of whatever kind of drugs to make him preserve longer, or her preserve longer, this, that, keep them longer. But all reality, the truth is, maybe the Creator said, today's the day you're going to come home. But we are afraid of that truth, so we try to make it go longer, and then we suffer more. And by hanging on to it, we're causing more suffering upon ourselves. And I tell, when I was present, I tell people, like, don't hang on to that. Don't hang on to that sadness. Don't hang on to all these things, because it'll fester within your body and make you sick. Even though it's hard, you have 2 ears, let it come in one ear and come out the other. Walk outside, touch your hands on the earth and say, I release it, let it go. Pick a rock up, tell whatever you're going to say to this rock and throw it as far as you can and never pick it up. That's how I grew up in the world, that way. We were taught never to hold on to anything. I recently shared with my nephew down there, because they were saying, oh, the people in this school, they call me this. They call me this name. I'm like, well, showed him a mirror. I was like, what do you see? He's like, well, I see myself. I said, then let it be like the wind. You can't see the wind, nor can you catch it. So let it blow through you. All these names, does it make you that person? He's like, oh, no, they call me Mexican because I'm brown. Are you Mexican? He's like, no. Did it make you a Mexican? He's like, no. Then let it go through you. Mm-hmm. Don't hang on to it. Don't let them put this title on you. For a long time, people say, oh, you're leader at large. You're one of the ministers in our church. And I'm like, no, I'm just a human being just like you. Even though in Western society, to be recognized by the government, we have to say that we are a minister in a Native American church, or we're a leader at large, or we're a roadman, or anything like that. In my everyday walk of life, I'm just a human being just like anybody else with a title. Yeah. Well, actually, I got like 6, but any other questions?
I got one.
Okay.
I feel like me and Lori always kind of ask this question because we're just curious about how different religions feel about it. But How is suicide viewed in your culture?
That's a really good question. I came into this whole thing because not knowing exactly what to talk about, because there's so much to talk about. I mean, I could sit here for a whole week and talk to you all day from sun up to sundown about different things. Suicide. Suicide is devastating no matter which nationality you come from. No matter which walk of life it is, suicide is frowned upon. We look at suicide in a native way of just like any other death. It's just that there's different ceremonies, different things that we have to go through that we normally don't with somebody that's already passing away naturally, because now they're cutting their life short. I have recently, 2 years ago, I had a nephew that his wife left him and this and that, so he couldn't take it, and he said, I'm killing myself. And that's like, and I, and, yeah. And so I told him, I said, well, I want you to go to the bathroom and take a look in the mirror. I said, what do you see? He's like, nothing. I said, that's how you feel right now. You feel like there is nothing in this world because this woman left you. I said, ultimately, what you're seeing is your spirit has already left your body. In order to bring that spirit back around, you have to be accepting and say, this isn't who I am. We ended up taking his life anyway. So we had to go through all of that process of dealing with that, because it's like the Bible in everyday walk of life. It's frowned upon. But in a native way, the spirit is wandering now, because now it didn't have that opportunity to go all the way into where the door is going to open. Now we have to force the window to be open and take a hammer, break it or something in order to open it that way. And so some of them are stuck here for a long time. And some of them might catch a ride in somebody's coattail or shoestring or something and get to the other side. So I'm not sure exactly how to answer that besides it's being frowned upon. We talk against it, but it happens. And so when it happens, we just have to deal with it.
So for viewing like accidental deaths, so not everyone has the ability to live in old age and go through those ceremonial practices or see loved ones, and you know that death is coming and you're preparing for it, the family's preparing for it, all that. There could be situations where an accidental, like a car accident or anything else, that's how do you take care of like the for us still living on this side, having peace and understanding, knowing that they're okay, and then their soul on that side not being trapped because those practices were kind of taken away from them because it was a sudden accidental death. Hopefully that question makes sense.
That question does make sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to everybody else. Accidental death. In the world I grew up in with my grandparents, there are no accidents. Everything happens for a reason. People come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Say somebody is driving down the road and they get in a head-on collision with the semi. And for some reason, the Volvo survives, but the semi-truck driver dies. Well, it was an accident. In Western society, it was an accident. But we look at it as God's plan, Creator's plan. Maybe the truck driver, that was his coming of the end. And that's the way it had to happen. That's how I was raised. So there really is no accident. There's no accident in our language. There's no word for that. Just like there's no word for sorry. Things just happen for a reason. And maybe that's why they had to leave early, because their plan was only so far.
Now, couldn't we say that in the same way about suicide?
No. I mean, you could rationalize it however you want to about suicide, but that's one individual's choice to end it. Where an accident, it doesn't, you don't have that choice.
Would there be, you were saying or inferring, I think, that if somebody commits suicide, there would be special things that you would do to kind of help? Yeah, with opening that door.
Yeah.
But so, same with somebody accident, so normally you'd be hopefully with an older person sitting with them as they're at the end and singing and, you know, comforting them. So are there special or different traditions when somebody dies and you haven't been able to sit with them ahead of time?
Like with an accident, somebody got smacked by a semi. So is the tradition,
Different ceremonies or traditions or rituals that you would have after they die?
Well, after they die, whether it be accident or suicide or whatever, somebody drank the Kool-Aid or something, it's still, they still go through those body washing, still those things. The only difference is there's different songs, there's different ways of positioning the body, this and that, because we don't know exactly where, like I said before, we don't know exactly where they came in on this medicine wheel, but we know where we're sending them out to. Did I answer your question? Say that again?
You said, they always go out south? Did you
Yes.
say that? Okay. And so is that feet to the south or head to the south?
Is it feet or head to the south is the question.
It's not really complicated kind of thing. It depends, you know, like let's use Chris for example. Maybe he wants to go out feet first. Me, I came into this world slip sliding head first, and so we put our heads towards that direction. So we tried to, how I was taught was we tried to put it back to how it was in the beginning. And so if we came out this way, then we're going to try to go out that way. Does that make sense?
Imagining a breach base.
Yeah.
Comes in first.
So when I'm trying to clarify this, if someone is murdered or dies in an accident or commits suicide or some unexpected death other than illness or old age, how exactly do you get their soul through the window to where it needs to go? I guess I don't understand. I mean, I know you sing the songs and do all that, but how do you get it to go to the Milky Way where it needs to go? Because I didn't quite follow all that.
Well, that's a really good question. I look at it as a good question because, like, say for example, somebody did get murdered. How do we take that soul and direct it?
Right.
Well, we might say for example, it was one of my family members. Well, we might go, even though it's all roped off or taped off or however it is. I, for one, will probably just walk through the tape and start trying to piece together what happened there and try to bring it all back together, because somewhere's in that vicinity of that area is the spirit. And it might have happened so traumatically that it's hiding in a bush or it's sitting in a rock or sitting in a tree. And so people come in there and they take the body and they kind of take it out and put it in the freezer. And well, then the spirit's left here and the body's left over here. And so I would try to, for myself, I would try to come and say, okay, come over here, Amber, or whatever your name might be. Come over here before we take this. Let's gather it back up. We have an eagle bone whistle that we blow on, and it's calling the spirit. And so we're like, okay, it's a safe place. Come over here. And when we start our ceremonies, we start blowing our whistle to bring them over. And at midnight, when we bring in the water spirit, we blow the whistle again. Say, this is a safe place. And then in the morning time, we also blow that whistle to send them back, or we continue to call them. Does that answer your question?
The 4 days where you're sitting with the body before the spirit leaves. Any issues in different states about being able to have somebody, a body in somebody's home or I'm not sure if you said the TP or any issues in different states about that for 4 days?
I got relatives scattered all over the United States. I got friends. I've gone to many different ceremonies, many different wakes and funerals where not ever aware of it having an issue. I think the only state I didn't really sit at a wake or a funeral or something was in Texas. But I pretty much have friends and relatives everywhere. I mean, even like my wife's family over there, they're Greek Orthodox too. They also go through the whole process of 4 days of whatnot. But then they might come in, all right, well, you can come and look at the body for an hour, and then the body just sits there. Or where we just come in, we don't leave the body because we don't believe in leaving them. We want to sit there.
So if it's at the funeral home, you sit there, or do you keep the body?
Well,
with you?
if the family decides to keep it at the funeral home, we would try to make arrangements and say, all right, we want to sit with the body. I've only come across that one time in Montana where the family house had burnt down, and so they wanted to have the body. And so we all sat at the funeral home. It was kind of creepy, but but we sat there for 4 days, and the guy was like, front door's open. I'm going home to go to bed.
Can you do it without the body there, if there was, traumatic or wounds, or where it wasn't good to have the body in your presence, or you do different things to prep it, or it's preferable to have the body?
Can you honor the body without it being present?
Anybody can do the ceremony without the body because the spirit travels anywhere. So. But we just prefer to sit with the body just so we can look with our own eyes.
So it's always been my understanding in Idaho that when somebody's died, that they have to leave their home within 24 hours because of state law. How does that fit into the ceremonies that you do for people that live locally here?
I'm unaware of that law, but like I said, when my brother passed away in my house, I waited for my brother to come from Seattle, and I waited for my sister to come from North Carolina. So even though the hospice person came and who was there when he crossed, the body laid in my basement in the TV room for I think 2.5 days when they finally came. And then we did our thing, this and that. Then the coroner came in and they came and hauled them away. And then we flew to South Dakota.
I think you just have that over at the hospice house that the body needs to leave.
Well, I always thought it was in the home setting too.
I don't think it's in the. I thought I looked into that.
Huh.
Yeah, the home setting is a different thing.
Yeah. I mean, so if it is a law, I didn't know about it. I mean, they didn't tell us. I just said, because they said, what do you want us to call these people? And I'm like, well, no, I got to get the brothers and sisters here, and we got to do this.
I'm gonna have to have somebody clarify.
Yeah.
Because I think that's wonderful, because I think that traditions should be honored. And, sometimes government tries to override things for traditions.
Yes.
So we want to make sure we're supporting the people we take care of effectively.
A couple of years ago, I used to be part of the North American Treaty Council. And so I used to be part of that. So I went to one of their little seminars there, and I was over there in Seattle, and we were talking. And so I asked the question, because the guy at the Department of Interior or whatever from Washington, D.C. came. So I asked the question, why is it there's only 3 things in the United States that have to be registered by blood in the United States? Why is that? And he's like, well, I'm unaware of it. What is it? I said, horses, dogs, and Native Americans.
What is it? Has to be recognized by what?
We have to be registered by our blood in the United States. I mean, government is weird.
And did you ever find out the answer to that?
He never needed the answer. I never found out the answer.
When you guys are tracking the spirit, do you use your senses to track it? Can you see it with your eyeballs?
How do you track the spirit?
There's a little device at Walmart. No, it's a lot of practice growing up in these ways of learning how to communicate with the spirit, how to communicate with the elements. It's not just something that you can go take a class and 2 hours, 4 hours later you're certified with a certificate or not. This is the everyday walk of life for myself. I'm not saying that I'm a shaman, or a medicine person or anything. I'm just a regular human being that has the ability, the knowledge, the wisdom to understand these different things that happen. Tracking it, you say, it's just it's like you're opening your heart, you're opening everything and say, okay, we're trying to do this ceremony because we want this person to cross over here. So basically, we're putting ourselves out there to say, okay, come on, Chris, let's go over here, come out here, and you're standing out here outside. Let's pretend we're in a teepee. So physically, I'm inside the teepee praying. Spiritually, I'm outside. Come on, Chris, I know you're out here somewhere. Let's come over here. Come on, I'll stand right here. Come over here. Come this direction. Follow my voice. Something along those kind of lines until you're actually standing right here. Because spirit to spirit, you can see each other. We're neither male or female when we're spirit. We're just spirit. And so when they recognize each other and talk to each other, they say, okay, this is what we're doing. So we're going to take you over here. We're going to open this door and shove you through it. Answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Do you treat military veterans any differently, ceremonially at the end?
Oh, I have the greatest, most respect for the military people. I try to go far beyond for military people. When my brother, because he was in the military too, we basically did those ceremonies, but we invited lots of different other veterans that came. And so on the spiritual side of things, we did it more in the Native warrior society kind of thing, rather than Western society military. So because I'm a member of the Kit Fox Warrior Society. I'm also a member of the Dog Soldier Society and the Strong Hearts. So those society songs, we bring them in and sing. We got asked to come over. My brother, who lives over in Seattle now, we got asked to come over and sing for one of his friends that because he works at rehabilitation center over there. One of his friends was a non-native, that was a veteran, and that passed on. So the family said, well, can you come over and say a word of prayer? And he said, well, can you come over? This is a veteran. I said, yeah, sure. I went over. That's all he had to say. He was a veteran. Went over. And we sang warrior society songs for the body. We sang for the family. And the family was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then when we were done, they were like, oh my gosh, this was so beautiful. You did this. And I don't know if that answered your question, but I have the utmost respect for veterans. Not that I'm one myself, but I always wanted to be a veteran, but I got kicked out when I went to boot camp. Only because I grew up in the world where in 1876, the Lakota, Dakota, and the Cheyenne people captured the flag at the Battle of the Big One. Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton said, we're the only nation to conquer a nation. And to this day, we still have that flag sitting in our tribal council chambers in case. And that caused me havoc because I couldn't be a veteran because then I was like, no, that flag belongs to us. Question?
What would you say is the ultimate hope and meaning knowing our souls going into an afterlife? What is the ultimate hope and meaning of that?
I think everybody has their own perspective on what their hope and their meaning of things like that. For myself and my family, is the ultimate is peace. That's how we look at it. Is if the spirit, the body, however you want to look at it, is at peace, then we're at peace. If they're uncomfortable, then you would know. I mean, we've all heard, well, that house is haunted. Well, something may have happened in the house, and they're not completely satisfied. They're not at peace, and that's why they keep moving dishes or doing something in the house. I've come into rental houses where I was renting, and I'd find all my dishes in the middle of the room, or I'd find furniture moved or stuff like that. And I'm like, all right, let's get you out of my house. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
So my question is kind of like Nick's. Do you believe that there is a heaven where you see all your loved ones that have passed before you? And if you do you have to, how do you get into there? Like, do you have to, would sin prevent you from getting into that heaven?
That's a good question, because many people believe a lot of things and some people don't believe in a lot of things. My wrist doesn't twist, so I gotta. I don't believe in a heaven, or maybe I do. I just have a different word for it. Because we make our own heaven. We make our own heaven, I believe. I'm not saying it's for everybody. We make our own heaven how we want it to be. We call it the happy hunting ground, because I like to hunt, and so I'm going to go over there and I'm going to hunt. There's going to be deer, elk, buffalo, everything surrounded. Not too much people, but more animals, so I can hunt forever. But I grew up in the world when my grandparents in the native way of learning and teaching and all this and that, where like I don't get lonely. because when I go into the ceremonies, I see my mother in the fire. I see my father in the fire. I see my brothers. I see my uncle, because they're right here, right next to me. We're surrounded by them. We live on earth, but in heaven. Yeah, on earth, in a happy hunting ground. However you want to word it, there's just the split veil in between that we don't see. Whether that door opens or closes, we can't get through. Just like that door right there, we could look out it, but we can't get out until we open the door, unless we crash the window or something. That's where I come in my belief system is my parents are still here. So is my brother, my uncles, everybody. So me, I'm happy that they're gone. I'm happy that they're over there because they don't have to pay rent or suffer over here anymore. To answer your question?
What about the sin part?
The sin?
I do believe that there is sin that will keep you from sinning somewhere else, or you're a bad soul.
Okay, let's put this back into different perspective. Like I had to go through the Jesuit school. So I didn't know anything about anything until I went to the Jesuit school and they told me, oh, you're going into the lake of fire. You're going to hell. And I'm like, well, I didn't know all this existed. I mean, but I look at it as we were born in sin. So we carry sin no matter what. When we leave this world, we're still going to take the sin because in the Bible way of looking things, we were born through that first sin that happened in the beginning of time. So we carry it, whether we choose to make it grow or make it go away. We are all going to go to the big lawn out there and be looked at and say, is your name written in the Lamb's Book of Life? Did you live your life accordingly? Because I'm not going to go up there and say, well, did you talk to Jennifer before you came up here? I'll say, no, but I tried to live my life this way. Well, Chris didn't drive the oil truck for you to get over here. So. So the whole sin thing, I think, is I'm not saying that it's that way. I just like to say we're brainwashed that way in Western society to think that we're doing something wrong when in all reality. Is it wrong or is it just somebody else is saying that it's wrong? And so we believe them that it's wrong. Because maybe the Spirit is telling you to do this over here because that's what your path was in this life. Does that make sense? But in Chris's eyes, that's probably a sin because you crossed your legs the wrong way, or. I pick on Chris because he's been to a couple of our ceremonies. Yeah. Any other?
I have a question. Are there any ceremonies that are open to the public that people can attend, or would those be, like a powwow? Are
A
those?
powwow's not a ceremony. A
Oh,
powwow's a celebration.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So there's a difference there.
There's a difference, yes.
Okay.
There are ceremonies that I wouldn't say open to the public, but it's open to different people. I mean, I think if we let Chris come, we'll let anybody else come. A lot of the ceremonies are in the sweat lodge. And so you go in there, we heat the rocks and we put the rocks inside there. So they're very hot. And a lot of times people can't stand the heat.
Well, he does cool them down with water.
Yes, I do put cold water on them.
Humidity feels so good.
It does.
Yeah.
So can you tell us kind of what ceremonies would be versus what celebrations would be for? Like the purpose
Purpose of a ceremony?
Versus a celebration, like how are they different? What were they before?
Well, the celebration, like a powwow, like she mentioned, the celebration, it's a powwow. It's a celebration of like, well, back when I was younger, they used to have the powwows to celebrate the harvest. When I was growing up, we didn't start school until like, well, we start first part of August, and then we got 2 weeks off to go out and harvest all the fields and buck hay and all this and that. And then we had to come back to school. And then in springtime, then we get time off again to go plant again. And then we had to come back. And so we would get out of school till the end of June. So basically summer was like just July. But it kept a lot of people out of trouble. So back then, those powwows were celebrating those things. Celebrating the New Year, they're celebrating the Christmas, they're celebrating the military people coming back. They would put a powwow on for them to honor them and give thanks or whatever. And as time progressed on, it just became bigger and bigger. And then pretty soon it was like, well, I'm going to sponsor this and I'm going to put this much money in it. And then pretty soon now it's just a big celebration competition. So you go to these powwows and they're dancing for thousands of dollars. Where the ceremony, like the sweat lodge, where we go in there and we pray. I don't tell anybody how to pray or what to pray about or anything like that, because they all come there with their own prayers or with their own trauma or problems or however it is. One thing that I was doing, I say was because I'm no longer partaking of it because I own my own business. I'm a chimney sweep. So I look at it like I don't have time to do it anymore. And I think probably is because when my brother died, then I just kind of lost hope in doing it. When we would go out to like different veterans places, or veterans would come to our home for ceremonies or sweat lodges or all night teepee meetings, ceremonies, however. In our language, we call it, we chodnagi, the spirit behind us, our shadows. And what I've noticed when my brother went off to Afghanistan and did all this and that, he came back and he wasn't the same. I couldn't go to Afghanistan, but he left something there. It was traumatic for them. Something happened that caused the spirit to exit the body and then come back in. Something traumatic happened. And so when he came back, you could see it in his eyes that he wasn't the same person. And so we go through the ceremonies of sitting down, blowing our eagle bone whistle, calling across the water to that spirit to come back. And it's a long distance to come. And so it's not just sit down in this one ceremony here and then wait for it to get here. It's like sitting up for like 4 nights in a row. Sometimes we sit for 7, however long for that spirit to come back. But the patient has to be willing to receive that and be willing to be able to sit there. And it's very hard, but it's very traumatic too, that these veterans, they go through all these processes. Sometimes they never go through it. And so at the very end, veteran people, I've witnessed some veteran people call out for themselves because they're missing that part. And without even knowing it, they call out to themselves because they don't want to leave until they're complete. And a lot of times some never get that opportunity.
Did your brothers come back?
Yes. Yes, we went through that whole process. And long story short, they were in Afghanistan before 9/11 even happened. They were there a year and a half before We never knew that until he came back and told us. And so we did ceremony for 11 nights in a row in order to bring him back. But because he had shrapnel in his side and he had done all these things, it was a lot of like spiritually jigsaw puzzling things together here and there in order to create a path for him to come back. And then when he came back, he says, I'm going to go be with my brothers and sisters. And a week later, he passed away. So it goes back to the whole question of like, well, how do they know? I don't know for myself, but I think when you're spiritually connected to whatever is going to happen, then you just automatically know that, hey, I'm willingly wanting to do this. And so the spirit is communicating with whatever, however, and they're creating that path to happen. That's my theory. Any other questions? I mean, are we doing good?
Yeah.
I don't even know what time it is. Or did we? Oh, did we talk long enough?